heads! Off with their heads!
Completely unacceptable, violent, thuggish behaviour, and those involved should expect the full force of the law. That's the Prime Minister's verdict on yesterday's violent student protests. But the protesters say the real thugs were the police. Paul Mason investigates.
Why has British policing become so reliant on the baton charge?
We talked to one of the protesters, a former police commander, and an expert on gangs. After another day of diplomatic revelations, we asked the man who lifted the lid on the Vietnam War whether he thinks WikiLeaks has made the world a better place. And Newsnight and the BBC's Natural History Unit have come together to investigate the Sharm el-Sheikh shark attacks.
There'll be more attacks here, if not this week, not next month, maybe next year.
Good evening. The post-mortems of yesterday's protests in central London continue today, with the police launching a major criminal investigation into all of the recent demonstrations against higher tuition fees. Student groups say police incompetence and brutality were to blame. The police says that a significant number of demonstrators went to the march with criminal intent. In a moment, we'll be asking how things took such a disastrous turn and whether anyone knows how to prevent it from happening again. But first, here's Paul Mason's analysis of what went wrong.
Last night, I witnessed a major breakdown of public order, which left one man seriously injured, Royal Protection officers reportedly seconds away from drawing their weapons, and the police facing big questions. With the debris still evident tonight, yards from Parliament, what went wrong? 2 p.m. was the moment police began to lose control. A small group of protesters tried to break away from the agreed route, and the police drew batons to contain them. The national leadership of NUS refused to support the march and were not on hand to lead it. The march organisers negotiated this route with the police, taking the march past the corner of Parliament to a final rally by the River Thames. The organisers did go there, but the majority on the demo did not. They broke into the square, which was sealed at 2 exits. Watch yourself. The fences would soon become weapons, and by now, the only line of defence for Parliament was the last line, the Territorial Support Group, the Met's elite full-time riot squad. Suddenly, the rear of the crowd tried to escape the square westwards past Westminster Abbey. You can see, as we moved through it, the crowd was not aggressive, but towards the front, finding itself blocked, those determined to fight soon appeared. It was here that the crowd violence and the police response escalated. Snooker balls, fireworks and flashbangs were thrown. Mounted police were drawn back and then put in a series of charges. In between, they pulled people from the crowd.
Get back in there. Get back in there.
And pushed them back in. It's clear not everyone was there for the violence.
They've got to make sure they go back in. Don't just take them out. They've got to go back in.
This level of violence prompted the police to kettle the entire demo, and it was here, later, that 20-year-old student Alfie Meadows sustained injuries that needed emergency brain surgery earlier today. Round the corner from these scenes, if you look carefully at this footage shot at 4:45 by our team, you can see there's a line of 5 casualties being treated, each one a protester, each one has a head injury. It's prompted student leaders to call for a rethink of policing tactics.
I think the Metropolitan Police need to be held to account for their policing tactics. They need to answer publicly about the tactics they use. They need to be clear about the tactics they use. And frankly, the public have lost trust in the police. The public do not want to see 14-year-olds charged by horses, kept in for hours and hours and hours in the freezing cold, for the police to stay silent over very serious incidents for months and months and months until official inquiries are over.
Our streets! Our streets! Our streets!
Another key development which has complicated policing in all the student demos is the presence of large numbers of school students, including gangs of youths from London, who injected a whole new dynamic of unpredictability. It was perhaps these people the Prime Minister was referring to today.
When people see scenes of flags being torn off the cenotaph, people despoiling the statue of Winston Churchill, of police officers being dragged off police horses and beaten, a crowd behaving sometimes in an absolutely feral way, I think people see that as completely unacceptable, violent, thuggish behaviour, and they want the law and the courts to take the necessary action, and I very much hope that they will.
Though they dispute that, the campaigners do see last night as symbolic of something bigger.
It really does bring home to you what's changed here. Something big has changed in the last month. I mean, the Chief of Police came out and said the game has changed, but I think the whole parliamentary game has changed. The relationship between state and citizens is breaking down entirely, particularly amongst my generation. And I think people need to not underestimate that by saying, oh, violent kids, because actually something much bigger is going on here.
As night fell, somebody in law enforcement decided it was safe to put the heir to the throne into a 1977 burgundy Rolls-Royce and drive into streets where there were already reports of looting.
Off with their heads! Off with their heads!
The Met's commissioner praised the restraint of armed protection officers. Newspapers reported tonight they had come within seconds of drawing their weapons. The student demos have posed three new problems for the policing of protest. One is leaderless marches, where negotiation is difficult. Another is the presence of groups of youth who seem to have very little to lose. And finally, there are the policing tactics which seem, to those on the receiving end, to punish the many for the actions of a few. The old tactics, from kettling to horse charges to photographic intelligence, did not keep order. In the new world, symbolised by this image of Cambridge undergraduate Charlie Gilmore, police chiefs are said to be working furiously to come up with something new.
Well, we asked to speak to the Metropolitan Police, but we were told no one was available tonight. But I am joined by the former Deputy Assistant Met Commissioner Brian Paddock, by Student Union leader Claire Solomon, who negotiated the route of the protest with the police, and by Alan White, who's an expert in public order and gang culture. Brian Paddock, we're hearing tonight that one of the things that the Met will be thinking about in this investigation about how to do things differently is the use of water cannons at these kind of events. Do you think that's the right response to what we've just been hearing?
I don't think it is, and we've actually, the Metropolitan Police have researched water cannons before, and what they found was that they took far too long to fill up and far too short a time to discharge. So they have been tried before and dismissed. I think what they need to do is they need to get much better around intelligence, around identifying who the ringleaders and the troublemakers are, have been in the previous demonstrations, perhaps arrest them before the next protest takes place, or at least when you see young people wearing masks who are clearly intent on violent disorder and taking them out of the demonstration to allow a peaceful protest to take place without them.
So you accept this was a complete failure of police tactics? You just lost control completely of a demonstration that might otherwise have gone off completely peacefully?
I'm not a serving police officer, and people will know that I'm no apologist for the Metropolitan Police. But what I would say is that in the circumstances we saw yesterday, the police were faced with an almost impossible job, because there were so many people who came to central London not only intent on violent disorder, but equipped for violent disorder, carrying flares, snooker balls, all sorts of different weapons in order to attack the police.
But Claire Solomon, I mean, we actually, if there was a loss of control, it was partly the police, but also the demonstration. It went completely off the route that was supposed to be taken. I mean, you lost complete control of it as well. Well,
it's not true that it went off the route. We've already said that we did end up at the rally that the NUS ordered,
you did, but very few other people did.
Oh, well, I think, you know, when we negotiated with the police, we tried to say to them, people want to come here to protest outside the Houses of Parliament. That is where the vote is taking place, and the Parliament Square was fenced off, and we said you need to remove those fences and let people peacefully demonstrate and exercise their democratic right to protest.
And you do condemn the violence that happened?
I think
assume you do.
This question keeps coming up, doesn't it? I put it to you. Do you condemn the violence that the police meted out on 40 of our students who ended up in hospital? One, my friend, who had brain surgery this morning. I think it's an outrage that people keep blaming the students. When you see the things that young people have to go through, I think it's also, it's a disgrace that Brian's suggesting increased intelligence when we already see young people vilified throughout society, stop and searches, ASBOs, they're never listened to, they're never asked to participate, and now you want to increase intelligence.
But even considering your own role, didn't you feel any kind of responsibility, some kind of duty of care? You're part of the organisers of a march like this. People go to it, if they do go to it wanting to be peaceful, they go to it thinking that there will be stewards probably leading the march, knowing that it's going to go in the right direction. You completely let those people down.
We had democratically elected stewards elected at the London Student Assembly. The police are not democratically elected. We discussed with them their plans in advance, and they totally broke their promises to us. How are we to trust the police when 1 minute they're supposed to be aiding the protest?
In what way? How do they break their promises?
Next minute they're containing us. The next minute they're charging us. They create flashpoints that we have us as stewards have no idea how to manage properly. The fact that people were kettled for hours so tightly that they were unable to sit down or move their hands or feet.
And you think you should keep promises to people who have snooker balls, who are throwing snooker balls?
We can't control everything that goes on in a demonstration, and you know that. But we do have to look at the cause and effect of these things. People come to demonstrations because they're angry, because of the situation that's going on in society. If the police have kettled them as they have done on demonstrations in the past, I'm not surprised that people want to come with a different mindset and take different tacts. But the police shouldn't be there to be brutal to us. And I think what we need, because we don't have the full facts. I think none of us have the full facts.
Why else would you come with snooker balls? Why would you come with snooker balls to a peaceful demonstration?
I think we need an immediate investigation.
Sorry, can I just ask you, why would you come to?
I don't know why they've come with snooker balls. Why don't you ask the people that bought the snooker balls? I think what we need to ask is, what we need is a full investigation into what's happened, into the police brutality, and we want people to come forward, eyewitnesses, because we know that CCTV camera footage will not be released, as was the case with Ian Tomlinson, until many days later, and we need people to bring us their phone evidence to let us know what's happened.
I know you want to respond, but I just want to bring in Alan White, because I know you spent a lot of time looking at just these kind of protests and these kind of and youth movements in general. I mean, what do you think of this? What do you think went wrong?
Well, look, I mean, it's patently clear from what you're hearing from both people here that there have been fairly catastrophic errors made on both sides. I mean, really, if we start right back at the very first demonstration and go right the way back to Millbank, the failure of intelligence there to allow that situation to take place is a pretty heinous error. And you've got to bear in mind that that doesn't excuse the people who've broken into the town.
But Brian Paddock has been saying that they should be able to identify these people in advance. From what you know, is that plausible? Is there any way that you would know who these troublemakers would be in advance?
Well, look, you've got to bear in mind that we're dealing with quite a relatively new phenomenon in recent history, and that you've got to remember that for getting on for a decade now, the youth of Britain have had precious little outlets by which to vent their anger. I don't think most of the people on this would have been on the Liberty and Livelihood March. So it's a fairly new phenomenon, although it's one that goes back. The recent riots we've had.
Sorry, just to say that. I mean, that doesn't. If it is so new, I mean, Brian Paddock, how can we possibly, if it's something that's very new, it's a different kind of demonstration that's coming from a kind of broad disaffection, much easier to organise because of the internet and everything else. I mean, how can the police be a match for that in the way that you're suggesting?
Well, because these things are organised via the internet. That means that the organisation is out in the open, and therefore the police can look into that. We've had 3 major demonstrations now. The police have been there every time with their video recording and evidence gatherers, with their still photographers. They should by now have been able to identify who the troublemakers and ringleaders are and be able to arrest them prior to the event taking place.
A lot of them were wearing balaclavas. They were covering their faces.
And under the Public Order Act, it is an offence to continue to wear masks at a demonstration if asked to do so by the police.
So they should have taken them off. You think they should have taken them off?
The police should have asked them to take them off, and if they had refused to take them off, the police should have arrested them because there is the power to do so. And the police did not do that yesterday. They allowed young people who are masked up, clearly intent on some sort of criminal activity, to continue to march with the peaceful protesters. The police should have taken preemptive action and taken those people to one side.
Claire Solomon, I mean, I guess we're trying to actually learn some lessons from here, not just be throwing blame about. I mean, in your ideal world, how do you think the police should be responding to this? I mean, it seems like the police is always considered the enemy by the students at these demonstrations, but they do have a role in helping to keep them safe.
I don't think that's true, actually. I mean, we all know that we organised what we wanted to be a peaceful, and what was largely a peaceful, fun and vibrant demonstration. Many students chatting to the police.
But what should they do?
They were chatting to the police, talking to them about the cuts that are coming to the police as well. And it's when the police betray their trust.
But what should they do when presented with this kind of situation? What should they do? A crowd that you had lost control over, that we don't even know who the leaders are, where many of these people have come from, why they're there. What should the police do?
Well, first of all, you're talking about the internet. You do know who the leaders are. We are all involved in this, and that's one of the great things about the internet, that we don't have to hide who we are when we organise these things. We're very open in saying that we're angry. I think the police need to allow people to peacefully protest, to get their point across, and then we won't have these skirmishes. And certainly they shouldn't be charging. There were, students as young as 8 years old on the demonstration from the Woodcraft folk. We should not have horses charging at young people, or any people for that matter.
Thank you to all of you. I think it's probably not going to be the last time that we discuss this, but thank you.
Thank you.